Welcome to Management Live, WOBI on Leadership. In this incredible event, the greatest speakers get together to talk about the making of the leaders of the present and the challenges for the leaders of the future. We've packaged the highlights of this event into a TV show to entice you with news stories and to update you with the latest trends that are shaping the leadership arena of the business world. Push the boundaries, challenge the conventional, and reinvent your business. Listen to those who are walking into the unknown, shaping the future. For our first conference presentation, let's invite Peter Docker. He's a former senior UK Royal Air Force officer and international negotiator for the UK government. He works to enable people to be extraordinary. Peter was inspired by Simon Sinek's theory of the Golden Circle and is today dedicated to helping leaders and organizations discover their purpose and harness the power of why to create extraordinary cultures and perform at their highest levels. Let's get inspired by him.
Leadership is about creating simplicity. Management's about handling complexity. Leadership is about creating simplicity. So let me now create a little bit of simplicity. A few years ago, a really good friend of mine, you will have heard of, Simon Sinek, he made a discovery which profoundly changed the way he perceived the world works, and therefore the actions and the results he gets. It turns out that all of these people, whether actually we're talking about Jasmine, the waitress, or we're talking about Apple as a company, or Richard Branson, or Anita Roddick, it turns out that all these people think, act, and communicate in exactly the same way. And it just happens to be the complete opposite to everyone else. All that Simon did was codify the model. And we call it the Golden Circle. It's probably the world's simplest model. Challenge for the cameraman. This little idea explains why some people, some organizations can attract so many followers over a long period of time when others simply can't. So let me explain these terms. Everybody in this room knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it. Call it your unique selling proposition, your differentiating proposition, proprietary information, what makes you different or better. But only the inspired organizations, the inspired leaders know why it is they do what they do. And by why, we don't mean to make a profit. That's down here, that's a result. It's always a result. By why, we mean what's your cause? What's your belief? What's your higher purpose? Why did you get out of bed today? And why should anybody else care about that? And as a consequence, most of us think, act, and communicate starting from the outside in. We go from the clearest thing through to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders, the inspired organizations, they think, act, and communicate from the inside out, starting with why. Let me give you an example. We tend to use Apple, not because they're perfect, but because everybody gets this. If Apple were like any other computer organization, a marketing message from them might go something like this. They'd say, we make great computers. They're beautifully designed, wonderfully manufactured, and easy to use. Do you want to buy one? And you go, yeah, maybe, yeah. And that's how most marketing, most branding messages are done. You know, we say what it is, the product or service we have to offer, and then we tell people what makes it different or better. You know, here's our new television. It's got 3D, Wi-Fi, 4K, buy our television. Or here's our new washing machine. It's got 40 different programs, only one of which you'll ever use. Buy our washing machine. But it's uninspiring. This, on the other hand, is how Apple actually communicates. We believe everything we do challenges the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is that we make products that are beautifully designed, wonderfully manufactured, and easy to use. We just happen to make computers. Completely different, yeah? But all I've done is reverse the order of information. But by reversing the order of information, starting with why, that's why many people in this room will be happy buying a computer from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a tablet from Apple, or maybe a watch from Apple. But as I said earlier, Apple is just a computer organization. There's nothing that differentiates them structurally from any other computer organization. Other computer organizations are equally well qualified to make all of these products. Take Samsung. Samsung's a great computer organization. They make all of these products. But you know what? They had almost 2 years where quarter on quarter their profits fell. They reversed the trend last quarter of last year. Their profits went up a little bit. One of the main reasons why? They make the processors for the Apple iPhone. Apple take 80% of the global profits of all iPhone sales. All of them. 80%. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Not what, but why you do it. And when you think, act, and communicate starting with why, that's when it inspires others who believe what you believe, who support your cause, your higher purpose, to come and join you, either to work with you in a team, or to be a customer, or just to be a follower, or somebody who cheers for you.
Wow, that was really inspiring, wasn't it? Now, let's listen to one of the most renowned experts in leadership, George Kohlrieser. George Kohlrieser, Professor of Leadership and Organizational Behavior at IMD in Switzerland, and author of the award-winning bestseller, Hostage at the Table. He'll tell us about the importance of the secure basis for leaders who, before leading others, have to successfully lead their own lives. Let's listen to George.
Get ready for a journey this afternoon. I'm going to cover a whole number of areas, not too fast, not too slow, but really built around this whole idea of leadership as a calling. Because we have a crisis in leadership. Most people, as you've heard from the speakers this morning and this afternoon, are facing employees that are disengaged, who do not have passion, who don't feel what they are doing as a calling. And I want to bring home what we now know about callings and how leadership has to come from some deeper desire in your heart, in your soul, or from external signals around you that give you the opportunity to really stretch yourself. And this means thinking about leadership as a story you are creating. And that involves personal, professional, organizational. And what is the story that you're telling? And are you really living your calling? Are you doing what is in your heart, what you desire? And secondly, is your story creating what you want in your life? Are you getting out of life what you want? And as a leader, we're going to talk about leading self, leading others, and leading organizations. And that means we want to understand what this journey is. Now, that journey involves both hero and heroine. So for the women here, your story is not a hero story, a masculine story, it's a heroine story. For the males in the room, you're in the story of a hero. And those two journeys have many similarities, but also many differences. And we need to recognize the journey that heroines, women, go through. And especially those of you who have daughters growing up who are children or teenagers or young adults, how you can help them understand their journey as a heroine or a hero. And everybody should be one of those in your life story. And that involves what Joseph Campbell called the journey of the hero or heroine. It's first a call to adventure. So when you took your job that you have now, or a previous job, did you feel that as an adventure, as a calling, as a challenge? And then comes the sacrifice and the pain. There is no journey worthwhile if it doesn't involve pain. What Joseph Campbell called the Valley of Tears. And he studied heroines and heroes for decades and centuries, as far back as he could get access to information. And he saw that there always was that deep pain. If you survived, and some do not in that call to adventure, then comes the transformation, the return of the heroine or the hero. And then comes also the transformation and making the world a better place. If you're not somehow making the world a better place, and that fits much with what was said today about not just working for a bonus or a salary or a position, a bigger house, et cetera, et cetera. It's, are you contributing in some way to the welfare of your community, of society as a whole? And being able to understand that as a heroine, your journey, and I can't spend too much time on this today, this we're developing very strongly at IMD, and a heroine's journey starts by understanding what happens in your body as women. It's very different, I'm sure you all noticed, than what men's bodies are. And going through what happens in the body, in the soul, in the mind, in the spirit, what Jung called the anima. But what basically is the challenge for a heroine's journey is, first of all, to make peace with the mother. If you haven't made peace with the mother, then you still have some work to do in leadership and self-leadership. But then comes the big challenge for the daughter to make peace with the father, the grandfather, the grandmother, whoever it might be. So you bring a unity to that inner journey, and that enables you to really assert yourself. And we're going to ask the question later, who makes better leaders, potentially? Men or women? And I hope you all know the answer to that. The hero's journey, on the other hand, involves also getting into your body and understanding the difference between testosterone and estrogen, as the fundamental chemical process, but it's much more complicated. But the big challenge for men is, again, making peace with the mother. Was your mother there, or grandmother, some female figure? Or was your story a little bit like Steve Jobs, and with all due respect, who was challenged his whole life with the fact that he was adopted not just once, but twice. And in his lifelong journey, he always had trouble bonding or getting along with people. And so we have to understand, what is our experience as a male with our mother or grandmother, whoever the feminine caretaker was, and then make peace with the father and being able to understand the masculine, so that the male has to come to terms with the feminine inside. The research is showing very clearly that before the age of 5, having a mother and a father or a grandmother, grandfather, some nurturing figure, both male and female, is fundamental to learning how to care, and is fundamental with how you ultimately are able to lead. And in these longitudinal studies done at Harvard that's gone on since the 40s, they have found that the men, especially they were looking at, who had this affectional bond with a mother or a mother figure or a father figure were promoted in the military, were far more successful, and they lived longer. Let's face it, those of you who are mothers, fathers, parents, your biggest early leadership challenge is how to lead that child into the future.
Incredible inspiration. We'll be right back with more Management Live, WOBI on Leadership 2016. Here we are back with more Management Live, WOBI on Leadership 2016. Now we'll listen to a real disruptor. Hurst has developed a crucial concept to understand how business is changing, the purpose economy. He explains that, in fact, purpose is becoming the basic driver of innovation and the most important motivator of people inside organizations of every kind. Let's listen to this passionate and super interesting man.
I'm excited to be here talking about purpose and the purpose economy. And I'm going to share with you my research, share with you what we've learned, not about purpose as a form of poetry, but purpose as a form of economics and purpose as a form of science. So you guys ready? So my uncle, Mark Peratt, was an economist at Stanford University in Palo Alto, California. And he coined the term information economy in his thesis. And he predicted that the information economy would surpass the industrial economy. He wrote a 9-volume dissertation in which he laid out how the economy had evolved from an industrial manufacturing economy into an information economy. And this was really the inspiration behind my book. I personally never read anything that has 9 volumes. It's way too long. So I never read his dissertation, I have to be honest. But I had the good fortune of being able to talk to him and understand his core thesis and why he believed the economies were shifting. And I try to summarize in one slide here what I understood about why economies change. And what I learned was there's a big connection between biology, evolution in biology, and economics. I never understood that as a student or an entrepreneur, but biology and economics are very interconnected. We began millions and millions of years ago as apes running around the planet. And over millions of years, we evolved into Homo sapiens. And one of the things that really defines Homo sapiens compared to other species is that we're impatient bastards. We're incredibly impatient. And this whole evolution thing was taking too damn long. We weren't willing to sit around for millions of years waiting to improve our quality of life, to increase our lifespan. Evolution was too slow. And we said, why don't we hack evolution to have the benefits, but be able to manipulate nature, manipulate our environment to be able to have the same benefits. And it began with the agrarian economy. We learned how to use animals and land, and we settled down. We're no longer nomads. And in the process of creating this economy, we saw that it had the same benefits as evolution. We lived longer, and our quality of life went up, right? But that wasn't good enough for us. Again, we're impatient. We weren't willing to wait around. And we saw a bird flying up in the sky. And we said, ooh, I want to be a bird. I want to be able to fly. Do you know how long it would take through evolution to grow wings? 3.4 trillion years. Does anyone believe me? Good, I made that up. There's no way I could know how long it would take for you to, and that's a warning for this whole 2 days. Make sure you use your brain. Don't just listen to us up here. So we said we wanted to fly, and we created the industrial manufacturing economy. We built airplanes, we built factories, we built cities. We did what was unimaginable through evolutionary terms, to be able to actually fly, to be able to build cities and to be able to manipulate large amounts of land. It was an incredible feat. And again, it had the same benefits as evolution. We lived longer and our quality of life went up. It was a great success. But again, that wasn't good enough for us. We said, we want to do better. We want to live longer. We want a better life. And we said also, wouldn't it be cool if sitting here in Mexico City, I could talk to someone in China? Think about that biologically, having a loud enough voice that you could scream and people in China would hear you. Take a lot longer than 3.4 trillion years to do that, I think. But again, we did it. We hacked evolution, and we found ways where right now, we're so used to it, but think about it. You could pick up a phone and talk to someone on the other side of the world. It's absolutely phenomenal. And again, with the information economy, with technology, with the web, quality of life for so many people went up, and lifespans went up. So the question I've been asking in my book and as I go around the world is the iPhone the end of human evolution? Are we done? Is this the end? Last stop on the train? Or is there more? Are there other ways that we could live longer, increase our quality of life? And as you look at the trends throughout the workforce, especially in the classes that are defining innovation and growth, as you look at consumption behavior, and as you look at what CEOs are doing to evolve their companies, it's very clear that the next stop on the train is about purpose. Purpose has been directly tied to increasing our lifespan. People who live and work with purpose live longer, and they have a substantially higher quality of life. And it's impacting every industry as CEOs learn that it's no longer enough to just be able to differentiate on efficiency and speed, that more and more people, especially millennials, are demanding and asking the question, what is the meaning of my life and how can I gain more meaning and fulfillment in my life? And as Chip CONLEY will talk about tomorrow, and you guys are in for a treat, this guy is an amazing, amazing speaker, an amazing thinker. We are, as leaders, needing to be able to not just deliver the bottom of the pyramid needs to our employees, we need to help them find purpose, find a way to have work connect to fundamentally who they are as human beings. And that's the core thesis of my book, that we are, in the next few years, headed into an era in which purpose will define the difference between products, and it will radically change the workforce. And what I started to look at was purpose statements. A purpose statement is when someone creates a statement for themselves, typically a sentence, a couple sentences, that defines what their reason for being is, what their goal is in their work. What is it that defines success? It's much like an organization's mission statement or purpose statement. It defines your bottom line beyond money, what truly matters to you. How many of you have done a purpose statement for yourself? A statement about who you are? Awesome. A couple of you have. That means there's a lot of opportunity for a lot more of you to define at the core, not your purpose being, my purpose is to make as much money and climb the ladder. You know what happens when you do that? You get rich at the top of the ladder and are absolutely miserable, because that's not a true purpose. So as I studied thousands of purpose statements, what I saw in effective purpose statements, the statements that truly help someone decide what to do, and as importantly, what not to do, so that every day, as you have to face, whether it's small or large challenges in your career, you're able to make decisions aligned with who you are at your core. And what I saw was that all these effective purpose statements had three variables that they all had in them. They defined who you seek to impact, why you work, why do you do this work thing, and how you work. How do you go about solving problems? How do you go about serving? It was remarkable how this pattern emerged, just sort of out of all these statements. And what's more, as we looked at it, there weren't an infinite number of options to these answers. That we saw there were actually patterns behind how people defined purpose. And that we actually all share a core sort of DNA around purpose that defines what's meaningful for us. And that when you know that, you can start to predict what work, what situations will actually enable you to find purpose.
Well, wasn't that impressive? Now, let's get ready for more. The following speaker, believe it or not, will talk to us about romance. Tim Leberecht will help us answer this and other questions. How can we find romance through business? How can we design products, services, and experiences that connect us with something greater than ourselves? Let's listen to this renowned expert in marketing and workplace innovation and learn more.
So in the past day and today, you all heard a lot about purpose. And I'd like to talk about the little twin sibling of purpose, romance. And I'd like to make a case for romance being the oxygen that brings purpose to life. I have to say, though, I'm biased. It's a confession I have to make. I am a romantic. In fact, I am a business romantic. And I'd like to know how you qualify. So let's do a little show of hands. Who of you considers themselves a romantic when it comes to life, the way you live your life? Raise your hand now. It's kind of hard to see because the light is sort of romantic. Oh, okay, that's quite a few. Wow. Wow, that's as many hands as I've ever gotten. Okay, I can go home. Okay, but now let's raise your hand if you are a romantic when it comes to business. Oh, okay. It's a little thinner. Yeah, thank you. That's the usual reaction. Now, for some reason, business and romance seem to be at odds, and we seem to have a hard time reconciling them. You could argue that romance ends when business begins, and sometimes business begins when romance ends for divorce lawyers. But usually they seem to be sort of at opposite poles, which is a little strange. I want to clarify up front, if you're here to learn about romance in a sense of candlelight dinners and Valentine's Day and all these trivialized notions of romance, that is not what I'm going to talk about. And I'm also not going to talk about office romance. So if you need advice on how to manage falling in love with your boss or your colleague, that is also not the type of romance that I'm describing. If you still want to stay, you're very welcome. So the type of romance that I envision is experiences of awe and wonder and magic, moments in which our adrenaline runs faster like it does now for me, where we lose control, right? Where we have sort of a sense of exuberance and we fall in love with an idea, with a person, with an organization, with a project, with everything. So often the reality of our business organization looks like this, right? That's sort of the org chart, I think, that we sometimes encounter as we pursue our daily work lives. It's not surprising then that only 30% of employees worldwide are fully engaged at work, according to this Gallup survey, that we actually work more, but we earn less overall than in previous decades. And now there's a whole new dimension of our work life, right, that is coming right at us, which is the rise of automation, smart machines, robotics. It's an industry that is rising. In fact, there are some studies that predict that up to 50% of the human workforce is going to be replaced by software and robots in the next 20 years. And that does not only apply to mechanical work, but actually increasingly also knowledge work. And even creative work. So here we are, the robots are coming, and they're already here, right? Already AI, algorithms are utility, they're already a different layer that is part of the value propositions of our companies. And many pundits speak of so-called exponential organizations. The Singularity University in the Bay Area, where I come from, is promoting that concept. Organizations that are brutally efficient, entirely data-driven, that really measure everything, that are totally quantified, and in that sense, almost like dehumanized, right? They're so logical, so automated that they have a very linear goal. Amazon is probably the most prominent example of the old digital economy, and then of course, Uber, really the very aggressive, abrasive example of the new digital economy as an algorithmic quantified corporation. When we talk about these companies as consumers, as users, we often say, yeah, I'm not sure I agree with their ethics, but they're so convenient, right? Great business model. Yes, they are aggressive, but they're winning. And they are disruptive, and we kind of find that cool, right? Super convenient. But I think it is important to remember that algorithms are prone to flaws, very, very concerning flaws. And I want to share with you two stories that show what algorithms do to our being human and to the way we do business. Uber, during the hostage crisis in Sydney, introduced surge pricing. And it did so because, of course, there was heightened market demand during the hostage crisis, right? And it was the right thing to do from an algorithmic perspective, but it lacked empathy and it lacked tact. Algorithms do things right, but they don't do the right thing. And then another example, Facebook, last year, in the annual review highlights of one user, inserted this image of a 4-year-old girl. But the problem was that that girl had died that very year, right? So amidst all this cheerful presentation, the user sees this picture of his daughter that had died that very year, and he spoke of inadvertent algorithmic cruelty. James Bond knows that a license to kill also means the license not to kill. And that's exactly what algorithms cannot do, but we humans have the discretion to do. So what does this all do to us humans living in these quantified organizations? How does our definition of work and our identity change? We're already expected to be flawless, consistent productivity machines. But now, with automation, software, and robots, we're increasingly competing with smarter and smarter machines that we honestly, in terms of productivity and efficiency, cannot compete with. So in turn, what is happening? We turn ourselves into smarter machines. And we begin to apply the principles of quantification and datafication and optimization to our own lives. When everything is quantified, measured, engineered, made predictable, familiar, convenient, then where do we find these profound experiences, strange experiences, that deviate from the routine, that punctuate our daily life, that give our lives meaning? Where's the magic? Where are the strangers, the strangeness? Where's the romance? I believe we are at risk of engineering the romance out of our lives. Romance, which perhaps is the ultimate differential in a world of maximizers and optimizers. Now, that sounds pretty apocalyptic, but the good news is we've been at a point of such disenchantment before. 200 years ago, and I have to go all the way back to my German roots. In Germany and France, the Romantic movement emerged in response to an age of enlightenment and reason. So the Romantics revolted against it and espoused mystery and emotion, inconsistency, intrigue, drama, suffering as the antidotes to a completely scientific, rational worldview. And I believe we are at the cusp and we need a new romantic age, this time in response to the disenchantment caused by the total datafication and quantification of everything. And I think this time this movement can and must start with you in business, because business is so pervasive and so influential, maybe the only remaining operating system of our lives. And then the very last thing I would ask you is actually a very simple thing. It is just reframing the conversation and using romantic and romance in a positive way. So often we hear from people in meetings, oh, you're romanticizing, or you're romantic about this idea. That's good. Being romantic is incredibly powerful and an integral part of our business and of our being human. I'm a business person, but I'm also an unapologetic romantic. And I believe the world would be a better place if we had more romance in our lives. And I believe we must and can find it and create it in and through business.
Well, we'll get more romantic then, Tim. We'll be right back with the last conference presentation of this Leadership Summit. Hold on. We're coming to the end of the show, but first we have a few more conference presentations to enjoy. Our next speaker is Stephen Kotler, who is here to teach us about the importance of reaching the flow state in the things that we do. The experience of being in the highest state of engagement, when time slows down, self vanishes, and there is a complete merger between action and awareness. How can it enhance innovation, creativity, learning, motivation, decision-making. Let's discover it.
I'm going to spend the little bit of time we have this morning talking about a subject that's fascinated me most of my adult life, which is ultimate human performance. What does it take to be your best when it matters most? And I want to start out by giving you a little background on how I got interested in this topic, where it came from. And that story starts when I was 30 years old, and I got Lyme disease, and I spent about 3 years in bed. And if you guys don't know what Lyme disease feels like, it's sort of like the worst flu you've ever had crossed with paranoid schizophrenia. So physically, I was completely destroyed. I could barely walk across a room. Mentally, it was even worse. My cognitive function was so reduced, I lost my ability to spell, I lost my short-term memory, I lost my long-term memory, I couldn't work, I couldn't do much of anything besides lie on a couch and moan. And after about 3 years of this, the doctors actually had to pull me off medicine. My stomach lining started bleeding out, I was having a bad reaction to the drugs, and nobody knew if I was ever gonna get any better. And being that I was functional for about an hour a day and miserable the entire time, I started thinking very, very seriously about ending my life. I got very, very serious about suicide, and it wasn't for any depressive reasons, it was for a practical reason. From that point on, all I was gonna do was be a burden to my friends and my family. So I thought ending my life made good practical sense. And in the middle of all this darkness, a friend of mine showed up at my door, and she demanded that we go surfing, which was a ridiculous request, of course, right? Ridiculous for a couple of reasons. First, I hadn't been surfing at that point in about 5 years because I had nearly drowned in a big wave accident in Indonesia. Second reason, obviously, is I could barely walk across the room. But my friend wouldn't leave. She wouldn't leave. Hours passed, and she kept badgering me. And finally, I was like, all right, you know what, fine. Let's go surfing today. I can always kill myself tomorrow, right? What's the worst that can happen? So they sort of poured me into the car, and they drove me out to Sunset Beach in Los Angeles. And if you know anything about surfing, you know that Sunset Beach is the wimpiest beginner wave in the world. And they gave me a board the size of a Cadillac. And the bigger the board, the easier it is to surf. And they literally had to sort of take me by the elbow and lead me out to the break. And it was a tiny day, the waves were really small. And I sat out there maybe 30 seconds, and a wave came. And I don't know what happened next. Maybe it was muscle memory, maybe it was divine intervention, I don't know. But I spun my board around, I paddled a couple times, and I popped up to my feet. And I popped up into a dimension that I didn't even know existed. First thing that happened was my senses were incredibly heightened. I felt like I had panoramic vision, like I could see out of the back of my head. Time had slowed to an absolute crawl. It was just moving by like that freeze frame effect. If anybody who's been in a car crash, or what they call bullet time if you've seen The Matrix. And the craziest part about this experience is I felt amazing. I felt great. There was no more physical pain. There was no more mental fuzz. My brain was really firing. I felt amazing. I felt better than I had felt in years. I felt so good that I caught 4 more waves that day. And by the end of that 4th wave, I was destroyed. I was totally disassembled. They loaded me back into the car. They drove me home. They put me into bed. And people actually had to bring me food for the next 14 days because I was so sick and so worn down by my experience that I couldn't stand up and walk 50 feet away to my kitchen to make a meal. And on the 16th day, which was the day I could walk again, I got back in my car. I actually got a ride and went back to the ocean, and I did it again. And over the course of about 6 to 8 months, when the only thing I was doing differently in my life was going surfing, and all the other time I was just lying on a couch and moaning mostly, I went from about 10% functionality up to about 80% functionality. And I had no idea how that was possible, right? Didn't make any sense to me. Raised a number of critical questions, like first, what was going on? Surfing is not a known cure for chronic autoimmune conditions. The other thing that concerned me is these experiences I've been having were as close to a mystical experience as I've ever been. And I'm trained as a science writer. I don't really have mystical experiences, but Lyme is only fatal if it gets into your brain. So I kind of assumed that even though I was feeling physically better, the reason I was having these really altered states of consciousness every time I went surfing was because the disease had gotten into my brain and I was actually killing me. So I lit out on a giant quest to figure out what the hell was happening. And I discovered a couple of things early on that are critical. The first thing I discovered is the same state of consciousness that had helped me get from seriously subpar back to normal was helping normal people go all the way up to Superman. And we're going to spend most of the day talking about why. Second thing I discovered is this strange altered state of consciousness actually has a name. Technically, researchers refer to it as flow. You may know it by other names. Runner's high, being in the zone. If you play basketball, you call it being unconscious. If you're a stand-up comic, you call it the forever box. If you're a jazz musician, you call it being in the pocket. Flow is a technical term, and I'll talk about where it comes from in a second, but it is technically defined as an optimal state of consciousness. It is a state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. More specifically, it refers to those moments of rapt attention and total absorption, where you get so focused on the task at hand that everything else disappears. Action and awareness, they start to merge. Your sense of self, your sense of self-consciousness, it disappears completely. Time dilates, which is a fancy way of saying it passes strangely. So sometimes you'll have my experience, what happened when I was surfing, it slowed down and got that freeze frame effect. More frequently, it speeds up, and 5 hours will pass by in like 5 minutes. And we've all had this experience. When you sit down to write a quick email, only to look up an hour later to realize you've written an essay, that's time dilation. And throughout, all aspects of performance, both mental and physical, go through the roof.
Wow, that was really astounding, don't you think? Up next, we'll meet Freya Williams, an entrepreneur and innovator who's convinced that it's possible to create positive change in a sustainable way. She'll tell us about the green giants and how companies can make good business by taking care of the planet. Let's listen to this captivating woman.
I've been working at the intersection of business and sustainability for about 10 years now. And the question I've been asked the most often is this one: what's the business case for sustainability? Only they don't really ask it like that. It's more like, yeah, but Freya, what's the business case? The question belying a belief that there is none. And for 10 years, I'd always wished I had a better answer to that question. A little bit less efficiencies and savings, a little bit more revenue and top-line growth, a little bit less in the future business will, and a little more real money right here, right now. Because out there in the wilds of mainstream business, beyond the sustainability bubble that I tend to inhabit, this conviction, forged in the fires of Milton Friedman, that sustainability and business are fundamentally competing forces, is still alive and well. And this is a problem, because business must lead this change. Business is the dominant institution of the 21st century. But if there's no business case, business either won't or business just can't. Now, this is a problem that's kept me up at night a lot over the past 10 years. How was I going to find a better answer to this question? And one particular night it was keeping me up was back in January of 2012. And I was on deadline on an essay on this perennial topic of can purpose and profit coexist? And as I looked at what I'd written, I had to admit that there was nothing there that was going to convince a naysayer. I needed a better answer. So I did what people do when it's late and they're on deadline and they're desperate. I hit Google. And after some frenzied late night Googling, I stumbled on the information that Chipotle, the North American burrito chain, had 2012 revenues of $2 billion. I know it says $1 billion here. You'll see why that is in a minute. I did a double take. That's billion with a B. Chipotle, that sources all of its raw ingredients from humane, ethical sources and uses its marketing dollars to advocate for sustainable agriculture, had $2 billion in annual revenue. When had this happened, and why was no one talking about it? Because there's something about that billion, right? In the language of business, that billion holds a special mystique. And companies that reach that billion-dollar revenue threshold take on a whole new level of legitimacy. And as they should. In fact, less than 0.00006% of businesses ever make it to that billion-dollar mark. And for a sustainable business like Chipotle to do it, well, I wondered if I might have found something. And through further research, I was able to establish that, in fact, Chipotle was now bigger than Burger King, that titan of the American strip mall. And this is how, in fact, the fates of those two companies have diverged over the past 5 years. And what you're looking at here is Chipotle going through the roof, while Burger King flatlines. And I called this slide the New World Order because as I looked at this data, I thought to myself, is this the moment those of us doing the kind of work that I do have been waiting for? The moment when the new, more sustainable businesses take off and the businesses that have failed to respond fade away. Well, it was a tantalizing thought. But of course, one company does not a case make. But what I thought to myself, if there were more companies out there that make $1 billion or more a year in revenue from products or services with sustainability or social good at their core, because people thought it couldn't be done. And if I could prove that it could, well, I might finally be able to stop being asked that question every 5 minutes for good. So I did some digging, and long story short, I was able to find that there are now at least 9 companies globally with $1 billion or more in annual revenue from products or services with sustainability or social good at their core. And here's who they are. So Chipotle, we've already spoken about. Next up is Nike with Flyknit. You guys familiar with Flyknit? It's Nike's low-waist, high-performance shoe. And I'll talk a bit more about this shoe in a minute because it's a brilliant example of how to build a green giant. But that footwear line generates over $1 billion a year now for Nike. Unilever, the global packaged goods company. When Paul Polman, the CEO, came in, he established the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, a new corporate strategy for the company. This returned Unilever to a period of growth after 10 years of low to no growth. And this was a strategy that was about doubling the business while halving the carbon footprint and increasing positive social impact. IKEA, the global furniture company, they introduced, while I was writing the book actually, a line of products for a more sustainable life at home. These are products that help their shoppers live more sustainably. It's things like solar panels that you can buy at IKEA and install on your own roof. $1 billion revenue stream now and growing fast. GE with Eco-Imagination. Eco-Imagination is a line of products that are third-party certified to save clients both energy and money. And this actually generated $28 billion for GE last year. So a hugely, hugely successful line of things like jet plane engines and fuel-efficient locomotives. Tesla, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Tesla. I'm guessing there are folks in the room who, if they haven't already got one, would love to have one. I know I would. So this is the high-performance electric vehicle that proved the naysayers wrong. You can commercialize an electric vehicle. Whole Foods, the first organic certified grocery store in North America, $11.7 billion in revenue. Toyota with the Prius. It's been around a long time, but it still continues to grow. The original and still the best, perhaps, hybrid vehicle. And finally, Natura, the Brazilian beauty brand that empowers female entrepreneurs in its value chain and sources many of its raw ingredients from the Amazon. So, these are they. These are the green giants. The 9 companies that generate $1 billion or more a year from these products and services. And together, they generate a collective $100 billion a year just from these more sustainable products and services.
That was really phenomenal information. To end this show, we'll meet one of the most admired leaders of today. He started with a small hotel, founded an emporium with joie de vivre, and now is head of global hospitality and strategy at Airbnb. He'll tell us how, through appealing to the highest needs of both customers and employees, business focused on transformation and meaning can be created and sustained. Let's listen to this fascinating man.
I think that the best organizations in the world are organizations that are full of collaboration. And that is what I've tried to inspire in the organizations that I've led. More than anything, I want to have you take away one key lesson. And that is that the most forgotten piece of business is the fact that we're all human. And once you understand humans, you actually can be a great leader. So how about creating a company where you ask your employees what their purpose is? That's what we did. We literally, in the dot-com bust, we had 1,200 employees. We did a series of workshops learning what the purpose of all of our employees was. What did they want out of their life? We had some facilitators come in and help us with this. And what it helped us to see is that what a housekeeper wants from their life is very different than what a bartender wants. They both work in my company, but they have different purposes in life, and they get different meaning from their job. What we found from our housekeepers is that housekeepers love connecting with other housekeepers because 90% of our housekeepers were not born in the United States. 90% of them are immigrants, English as a second language. So they love actually doing a potluck every week at their hotel with the rest of the maids or housekeepers and actually sharing their foods from their home country. So we help to facilitate that. What we learned from this was that people can have meaning in work and meaning at work. Airbnb, when I joined a little over 3 years ago, had meaning at work. What Airbnb's meaning was, its purpose was sort of twofold. One is we wanted to democratize hospitality by opening homes around the world so people could actually become a host and they could actually become a little innkeeper from their home. But we also wanted to help people as the guest belong anywhere. Our message is to help people belong anywhere. So the thing that was very clear to me when I joined Airbnb was that as a company, we had a very strong sense of purpose and meaning in the meaning at work, people's sense of what the noble purpose of the company was, but we didn't have very good meaning in work. Meaning at work is the purpose of the company. Meaning in work is your impact or your own personal purpose. And what I found from my own company, Joie de Vivre, is asking all of the employees what their purpose is, and then helping to connect their purpose and help them to understand the impact of their work is really critical. So what I learned in Joie de Vivre, I ended up bringing to Airbnb. One of the things I learned that creates meaning is telling stories or having customers come in and tell their stories to the employees.
Thanks for joining us today on Management Live, WOBI on Leadership 2016. We hope you've learned and enjoyed it as much as we have. See you next time.